It was supposed to be a celebration. Las Vegas had seen Frank Sinatra rule rooms for years, and Elvis Presley was the new force everyone was watching. Different generations, different styles, same city, same night. What most people remember is the photograph, the smiles, the handshake. What history rarely talks about is what happened before the cameras were ready. Because behind the curtains, something went wrong. A rumor moved faster than the truth. A decision was quietly prepared, and Frank Sinatra was forced to choose, not between fame and loyalty, but between silence and consequence. Stay until the end, because the final moment of this story explains why that night is never talked about the same way again. And before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. Elvis Presley didn't enter Las Vegas like other performers. He arrived like a disruption. Not loud, not arrogant, just undeniable. The city felt it immediately. The Sands Hotel buzzed with a different kind of energy that week, the kind that made seasoned performers uneasy and executives overly polite. Elvis was younger, faster, less predictable, and everyone wanted to be in the room when he appeared. Frank Sinatra had seen this pattern before. He had been the disruption once. Years earlier, people whispered his name the same way they now whispered Elvis's. Sinatra understood that kind of attention came with admiration on the surface and calculation underneath. That evening, Sinatra arrived at the Sands earlier than planned, not out of concern, but instinct. When a room started shifting its weight, he liked to feel it happen. He walked through the casino floor without stopping, nodding to familiar faces, absorbing the subtle changes. Conversations paused when he passed. Smiles lingered a moment too long. Elvis was already inside. Not on stage, not in the spotlight, backstage. Sinatra spotted him from a distance. Elvis stood with a small group, listening.
Sinatra's jaw tightened slightly. He'd heard that phrase too many times. Better for the room usually meant better for someone who wasn't in it. The schedule confirmed Sinatra's suspicion. Elvis's set had been subtly shifted, not shortened, not canceled, repositioned. A quiet demotion disguised as logistics. Sinatra folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. They didn't do this for the audience. Elvis looked at him. And why do it? Sinatra met his eyes, because uncertainty keeps people obedient. Elvis let out a breath. You think this is about control? Sinatra nodded. Everything here is. The night moved forward. Sinatra took the stage first, effortless as always. The crowd responded immediately, grateful for familiarity. Elvis watched from the wings, hands clasped, expression unreadable. Sinatra noticed something else, too. The way certain executives positioned themselves, eyes darting between the stage and Elvis. They were measuring reactions. Midway through Sinatra's set, a decision was made somewhere Sinatra wasn't standing. A producer leaned toward the band leader, whispered something, then glanced toward Elvis. The band hesitated briefly before continuing. Sinatra felt it, a subtle shift in rhythm. He finished the song and stepped off stage, walking straight toward the producer. You want to tell me what that was? The producer smiled nervously. Just keeping things smooth. Sinatra leaned closer. You keep saying that. Makes me think you don't know what smooth looks like. The producer swallowed. We're just trying to manage expectations. Sinatra glanced toward Elvis. Whose expectations? The producer didn't answer. Later, Elvis finally took the stage. The applause was strong but uneven. Sinatra could hear it, hesitation mixed with excitement. Elvis performed with precision, but Sinatra saw the restraint. Elvis wasn't pushing, he was holding back. When Elvis came off stage, Sinatra was waiting. "You didn't give them everything," Sinatra said. Elvis shrugged. Didn't feel like the room deserved it. Sinatra smiled slightly. "That's the first smart decision you made tonight." Elvis laughed under his breath. "Feels like something's being decided without me." Sinatra nodded. "It is." "So what happens now?" Elvis asked. Sinatra looked back toward the stage, where people were already discussing the next adjustment. "Now we see who thinks they're in charge." Elvis studied him. "And you?" Sinatra met his gaze. "I'm deciding how loud the answer needs to be." That night ended without incident. No arguments, no headlines, but something fundamental had shifted. A line had been drawn quietly, and Elvis didn't know yet which side he was standing on. Sinatra did, and the next night would make that clear.
The second night didn't feel like a continuation. It felt like a reaction. Las Vegas had a way of adjusting itself quickly when something unexpected happened, and by the time Frank Sinatra stepped back into the sands, the room had already learned from the night before. People were more careful now. Smiles were measured. Conversations lowered the moment he walked past. Sinatra noticed it immediately. Elvis Presley arrived shortly after him, quieter than the night before. He wasn't withdrawn, just alert. The kind of alertness that came when someone realized they were no longer just being watched, they were being weighed. Dean Martin leaned against the wall near the bar, drink in hand, observing both of them. "This town moves fast," he muttered to Sinatra. "Word gets around." Sinatra didn't respond right away. He was watching a small group of executives gathered near the back of the room. They weren't laughing. They were calculating. "They didn't like last night," Sinatra said finally. Dean smirked. "They rarely like anything they can't control." Elvis approached them, nodding politely. "Feels different tonight." Sinatra met his eyes. "It is." Before Elvis could ask anything else, a man stepped in between them, one of the senior promoters, someone who rarely involved himself directly. His presence alone signaled escalation. "Gentlemen," the man said smoothly, "we've made a few adjustments for tonight." Sinatra raised an eyebrow. "Again?" "Just refining the flow," the promoter replied. "Vegas crowds are particular." Elvis crossed his arms. "Funny, last night they didn't seem too particular." The promoter smirked thinly. "Tonight's a different audience." Sinatra leaned forward slightly. "Audiences don't change overnight. Intentions do." The promoter's fauna faltered for a moment. "Frank, no one's questioning your judgment." Sinatra nodded. "Good, because I am questioning yours." The promoter glanced at Elvis, then back at Sinatra. "We'd like Elvis to keep things lighter tonight." Elvis tilted his head. "Lighter how?" "Shorter set, less intensity." Sinatra let out a slow breath. "You want him smaller." The promoter stiffened. "We want balance." Sinatra smiled. "Balance usually means someone standing on someone else's shoulders." Dean Martin laughed quietly. "Frank's got a point." The promoter ignored Dean. "This isn't personal." Sinatra's voice dropped. "That's what makes it worse." The man excused himself quickly, leaving behind a tension that didn't dissipate. Elvis turned to Sinatra. "Is this how it starts?" Sinatra nodded. "This is the middle." The show began with an unusual stiffness. Sinatra performed flawlessly, but the room wasn't relaxed. People were listening too closely, watching for something to go wrong. When Elvis's turn came, the band hesitated again, a fraction of a second, but enough.
Elvis stepped onto the stage and immediately felt it. The crowd was there, but something held them back. He performed anyway, voice strong, presence undeniable. But Sinatra could see it. Elvis wasn't being allowed to take the room. Applause cues were rushed, transitions cut short. Backstage, Sinatra confronted the band leader. Who told you to rush? The band leader glanced around nervously. Orders. From who? The band leader didn't answer. That was confirmation enough. Later, Elvis sat alone in his dressing room, guitar resting beside him. Sinatra knocked once and entered. "They're trying to teach you something," Sinatra said. Elvis looked up. "What lesson?" "That this place isn't yours," Sinatra replied. "Yet." Elvis frowned. "And you?" Sinatra shrugged. "They learned that lesson about me a long time ago." Elvis hesitated. "You don't owe me anything." Sinatra smiled faintly. "That's why I'm involved." The third adjustment came quietly. Elvis's name was moved on the promotional board outside the venue, still visible, just lower. Sinatra saw it as he walked by. "Subtle," he muttered. Dean Martin joined him. "They're seeing how much you'll tolerate." Sinatra nodded. "And you?" Dean shrugged. "I'm seeing how much fun this gets." Sinatra smirked. "Don't get comfortable. That's how they win." That night, a new voice entered the situation. Not a promoter, not management, someone older, someone who didn't need permission. He found Sinatra near the edge of the casino floor. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Sinatra didn't look at him. "I'm making it honest." The man sighed. "Elvis is young. He'll adjust." Sinatra turned then. To adjust to what? To the way things are done here. Sinatra's gaze hardened. "That's exactly what I'm protecting him from." The man lowered his voice. "You're risking more than his comfort." Sinatra nodded. "I know. You're risking yours." Sinatra smiled faintly. "I've already spent mine." The man shook his head. "This ends one way." Sinatra replied calmly. "Everything does." When the man left, Elvis appeared beside Sinatra. That didn't sound friendly. Sinatra looked at him. It wasn't meant to. "So what happens if I push back?" By the third night, the room no longer pretended to be neutral. The Sands Hotel still glowed from the outside, but inside, the air felt heavier. Not hostile, controlled. The kind of pressure that didn't come from anger, but from too many eyes watching the same thing, waiting to see who would blink first. Frank Sinatra felt it the moment he stepped inside. This wasn't about schedules anymore. It was about space. Who was allowed to take it? Who was expected to shrink? Elvis Presley sensed it too, even if he didn't yet have the language for it. His movements were more measured now, his presence more contained. He wasn't afraid, he was being studied. Every step, every pause, every reaction quietly noted by people who would never appear in photographs. Sinatra watched from a distance. He didn't intervene, not yet. He wanted the room to reveal itself fully, to show its hand without being forced. Around them, familiar faces drifted closer together, forming small clusters that dissolved the moment Sinatra looked their way. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Laughter arrived late. The stage felt different when the lights came up. The band played cleanly but without warmth. Transitions were sharper, faster, as if the music itself was being guided away from lingering emotion. Sinatra performed with ease, but his eyes kept returning to the same places, the edges of the room, where decisions were being shaped without sound. When Elvis took the stage, the reaction was restrained, not cold, but cautious. Applause came in waves instead of bursts, as if the crowd was waiting for permission to feel something. Elvis adjusted instinctively, pulling back just enough to avoid friction. Sinatra noticed. It bothered him more than any overt insult would have. Backstage, the energy fractured further. Someone moved a chair that didn't need moving. Someone else rearranged a table. Small gestures meant to reassert control. The kind of things people did when they wanted to feel ownership over a space that wasn't theirs. Sinatra passed a mirror and barely recognized the reflection. not because he looked different, but because the room around him had shifted. He remembered other nights like this, different cities, different names, same tension. He had learned long ago that when power felt threatened, it didn't strike, it narrowed. Elvis lingered near the wall, guitar resting against his leg. He wasn't playing, just holding it. Sinatra watched the way his fingers tightened slightly around the neck, then relaxed. Not fear, focus. Somewhere nearby, a quiet exchange took place. A nod, a brief glance, a hand gesture so subtle it might have been accidental. Sinatra saw it anyway. He always did. That was when he understood what was coming next. This wasn't about Elvis failing. It was about making him hesitate. The idea was simple. If Elvis questioned himself long enough, the room would reshape him without resistance. Sinatra felt something settle in his chest. Not anger, not pride, responsibility. The kind that came when you realized silence was no longer neutral. The show moved on, but the chaos grew quieter instead of louder. Tension slipped into corners. People stood closer together than necessary. Eyes avoided Elvis just enough to make him feel the absence. When the night finally slowed, Sinatra stood alone near the edge of the casino floor, watching the room decompress. He didn't need confirmation. The pattern was complete now. Tonight had been the test. Tomorrow would be the response. Elvis approached him.
The final night arrived without ceremony. No build-up, no whispers in the hallway, no visible tension in the room. That alone told Frank Sinatra everything he needed to know. When power believed it had already won, it stopped guarding itself. The sands looked the same as always, but the mood inside had changed. People moved with confidence again. Smiles returned. The room felt comfortable, falsely so. Sinatra entered calmly, greeting familiar faces, giving no indication that anything was different. Elvis followed shortly after, quieter than the nights before, observant, absorbing the room as it revealed its mistakes. Sinatra took the stage first. The performance was smooth, practiced, effortless. The audience relaxed, leaning into the familiarity. Sinatra gave them exactly what they expected, and nothing more. He watched the edges of the room while he sang, noting who settled back into their chairs, who stopped watching so closely. That was the opening. When the song ended, Sinatra didn't leave the stage. He stepped forward, adjusting the microphone slightly, as if reconsidering something. The band hesitated, unsure whether to continue. Sinatra raised a hand. The room quieted. Without drama, without emphasis, he made the decision. He altered the order. "Elvis," Sinatra said, voice calm, "come join me." The name carried differently this time. The room shifted, not audibly, but perceptibly. Elvis froze for a fraction of a second before stepping forward. The spotlight caught him mid-step, unplanned, unprepared, and unmistakably present. The applause came slowly at first, then gathered strength. Sinatra stood slightly aside, giving Elvis the space the room had been trying to deny him all week. No explanation followed. None was needed. Elvis performed without restraint. The difference was immediate. The tension dissolved, not because it was resolved, but because it had been exposed. The audience felt it instinctively. This was not adjustment. This was restoration.
Backstage, eyes followed the performance in silence. The people who had been shaping schedules and shifting positions stayed still. They understood now. Sinatra hadn't challenged them directly. He had simply removed their leverage. When the curtain fell, the room exhaled. Elvis stepped off stage, his expression steady, grounded. Sinatra met him with a nod.
That was all the acknowledgement needed. Nothing had to be said aloud. Later, as the night settled, one of the men who had been watching all week approached Sinatra. His confidence was gone, replaced by caution. "You didn't have to do that," the man said quietly. Sinatra looked at him. "Yes," he replied, "I did." The man hesitated. "Things will be different now." Sinatra nodded. That was the point. The man walked away without another word. Outside, the air felt lighter. Elvis paused near the exit, glancing back at the building behind them. "They won't forget this," he said. Sinatra adjusted his jacket. "They're not supposed to." Elvis smiled faintly. "You ever regret stepping in?" Sinatra shook his head. "Only when I don't." They parted without ceremony, without promises. The city moved on, as it always did. No headlines followed. No stories were printed. But backstage, something had shifted permanently. The room had learned its limit, and Sinatra had reminded it where the line was.